They handed her the restaurant over dessert. That's the first thing you should know. The steak was overcooked. Haley had insisted on curating the dinner herself, and the wine was warm. But none of that mattered. Not to them. What mattered was the performance, the surprise, the spectacle. My name is Claire Harper, and this is the night my family decided I wasn't worth more than the grease trap under their golden legacy. Your father and I have something to share, Mom announced, pushing aside her untouched fillet. Her voice was light, practiced. We've made a decision about Harper and Flame. I already knew. Somewhere in my gut, I'd known the second I stepped into the dining room and saw the 2 champagne flutes waiting, only 2. We're handing it over, Dad said, smiling at Haley like she was the answer to every prayer he never believed in. My throat tightened, but I kept my hands still on the napkin in my lap. I turned my gaze to Haley. She was glowing in that awful way people glow when they get something they didn't earn. I know it's sudden, she said, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. But I've been thinking a lot about the brand's positioning, and I just feel like it's time we modernize. Not even a second of hesitation. Not even a look toward me. I'd spent 13 years in that kitchen. 14-hour days, burned, fingertips, double shifts on Valentine's Day, quiet nights scrubbing steel until my spine ached. I had blood on those prep tables. Sweat, too. And still, I spoke evenly. What's my role in this modernized future? It was Mom who answered. And when she did, I finally understood just how far they had planned this. You'll still be involved. You'll start as kitchen support, a dishwasher to be specific. It's important that you learn the business from the ground up again, under new management. The breath in my chest stopped moving, like someone had reached in and pulled the air from me with their bare hands. I scanned their faces. Dad, nodding. Mom, rehearsed smile. Haley, biting her lip to suppress a smirk. Not even subtle. I waited for someone to blink, for someone to flinch, for someone to realize what they were doing, but no one did. Of course, I said. The table froze, not expecting compliance. I'll be there at 6 a.m. tomorrow. And I was. They thought I surrendered. What I did was take inventory. The dish pit smells like sweat, bleach, and betrayal. It's a place where time doesn't move forward. It loops, scrape, spray, stack, repeat. For the first few hours, no one spoke to me. A couple of line cooks snuck glances when they thought I wasn't looking. One server asked if it was some kind of punishment. I didn't answer. By the end of the shift, I knew the new inventory system Haley installed was already broken. The vendor list had changed. We were using low-grade beef marked as premium cuts. And someone had already quit. Luis, the night porter. Quiet guy. Good work ethic. Gone after Haley told him his hours were being repurposed. That night, I sat on the back stoop and peeled off my gloves. My hands were raw. Miguel sat next to me like he always did when we were younger. He used to carry bins while I diced onions at the prep station. He hadn't said a word all day. I saw your prep list last year, he said without looking at me. You had a fall-tasting menu drafted. Was that real? Yeah, I said. You still have it? I paused. What do you know? I know. Haley doesn't understand the difference between ribeye and sirloin, he muttered. I know you do. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood, brushed off my pants, and walked back inside. That night, I opened an old folder on my laptop, one I hadn't touched in over a year. Inside, a concept deck, menu drafts, supplier lists, a potential name circled in red, Ember. I'd written it in a fury one winter night after Haley mocked. The way I plated duck confit. They thought they could bury me in dishwater. But all they did was give me the perfect view from below, where all their cracks started to show. The next week, they asked me to help train Haley's friend Sasha, her floor manager, who had never worked a restaurant shift in her life. She showed up in white sneakers and a Gucci bag, told me she was obsessed with food culture. "Claire," Haley said sweetly in front of staff, "you don't mind showing Sasha around the kitchen, do you?" I nodded. Of course not. While Sasha took selfies next to the salamander broiler, I noticed something. The order board was 2 tickets behind, then 4, then 8. I stepped in, silently rerouted the chaos, and got the night back on track before Sasha even noticed. Haley never said thank you, but I saw her watching. The next morning, the prep fridge was off temp. Haley blamed the sous chef and threatened to write him up. What she didn't know, the repair logs had been falsified 2 weeks earlier. She'd cut maintenance costs without telling anyone. Later that day, Mom called. She asked how I was adjusting. "It's character building," I said. "That's the spirit," she replied. It sounded kind. It wasn't. That phrase, character building, was something Dad used when I was 15 and asked why Haley never had to do dishes after dinner. They hadn't changed. They never would. But I had. That night I stayed late, after close. While the rest of the crew left, I pretended to be deep cleaning the sinks. Then I snuck into the office and checked the vendor emails. Password hadn't been changed since Dad ran the place. Inside, a backlog of receipts, meat grades downgraded, portion sizes adjusted without customer notice, staff complaints left unread. One flagged email from a former supplier saying they were ending the partnership due to unprofessionalism. I downloaded everything. They thought I was quiet because I'd been broken, but I was quiet because I had stopped trusting noise. When I left the office, I ran into Haley. She was holding a glass of wine, alone in the dining room. The restaurant was dark except for the chandelier above her. "You stayed late," she said. "Just doing the job," I replied. She took a sip, then looked at me. Her voice dropped just slightly. "I know you're upset." I waited. "But you've always been practical," she said. "You get it, right? You're not really a front-facing person. You never liked being in charge." It sounded like concern. It was actually a warning. "I never liked being seen doing your job," I corrected, then walked out the door. She didn't follow. Outside, the sky was ink black and bitter. I zipped my jacket and breathed deep. They thought the fire had gone out. They were wrong. I wasn't out of the game. I was drawing the map. And the thing about flames? The quieter they are, the hotter they burn. The industrial dish room at Harper & Flame has no windows. The walls sweat in silence. Steam rises constantly, from the deep sink like ghosts that never left. That was where they sent me. The daughter of the founders, the woman who once built half the specials menu from scratch, into the bowels of the empire to scrape dried béarnaise off ceramic. I didn't fight it. Not openly. That was never the point. The third morning after the announcement, I arrived at 5:52 a.m. Miguel was already there, resetting racks. He didn't ask why I was in an apron instead of chef's whites. He didn't need to. We used to share midnight meals after close, years ago, when we both still believed this place was run on merit. Now he moved around me carefully, like I was radioactive. "Drain slow," he said, avoiding eye contact. "I'll handle it," I replied. No more words passed between us. But he started handing me the heavier trays without a word. Respect, in his quiet way. The others weren't as subtle. By noon, I'd heard someone whisper, "Nepo burnout" near the fryer, and someone else giggled after calling me Cinderella behind a stack of plates. Haley walked through once around 2 p.m., trailing perfume and performance. She clapped her hands at no one in particular and said something about high-vibe energy and kitchen synergy, then left as quickly as she came. No one laughed. Not because it wasn't ridiculous, but because it was dangerous to laugh. By Friday, I knew the staff schedule had been trimmed by 12%. Line cooks were now expected to run prep during breaks. 3 new hires had come in through Haley's influencer circle, none with kitchen experience. One asked me where the heat lamps were. Another thought mise en place was a dessert. I said nothing. I logged every incident in a file I kept on my phone, hidden under a label that read vendor contacts. That file was already 14 pages long. That night, as I was rinsing dried demi-glace off a tray, Miguel slipped a small envelope under the towel stack beside me. No words, no eye contact. I waited until closing, when the kitchen emptied and the air was still with leftover noise. Inside, the envelope was a single USB drive. Unlabeled. I didn't open it at home. I waited. Saturday was Haley's first vision review meeting, which she held in the private dining room like a CEO of a startup. She wore white. Her voice was sweet. Her eyes were cold. "I know this has been a lot of change," she said, looking at each staff member like she knew their secrets. "But progress is messy. That's why we need to cut emotional fat, you know? Streamline." She smiled. "It's nothing personal." Casey spoke up. Head pastry chef, 7 years in, quiet but lethal with plating. "You cut my supply budget in half." Haley's smile didn't budge. "You don't need imported cocoa for a seasonal special. Be creative." That was the last meeting Casey attended. Monday, she was gone. That night, I plugged in the USB drive at a cafe far from home. Inside, security footage, audio files, staff meetings, fridge cam, voice memos. One clip stood out. It was from 2 weeks before the announcement. Haley was in the dining room with our parents. No guests, just them. Her voice clear. "She'll hate it, but it's the only way to reset her ego. She still thinks this place is hers." Mom: "Claire won't walk away?" Haley: "She doesn't know how to leave. That's her weakness." Dad: "Then it's settled." I sat back in my chair. Let it wash over me. This wasn't a reshuffle. It was an execution. They knew exactly what they were doing. The demotion wasn't punishment. It was a cage. A strategic humiliation designed to erase me quietly, to force me to either comply or collapse. They wanted the former. They counted on the latter. They got neither. I started arriving an hour earlier. Not to scrub more, to listen more, to chart where the walls were thinning. Tuesday morning, I noticed a discrepancy in the delivery logs. Meats were marked as USDA Prime on invoices, but the box labels were choice, cheaper, tougher, and illegal to misrepresent. The vendor wasn't the one we used when I was still in the kitchen. I made a note. I checked inventory again that night. Short 22 pounds of sirloin. That wasn't shrinkage. That was cooking the wrong cuts and lying about it. Wednesday, I saw a hostess crying near the dumpster. I handed her a tissue. She whispered, "She made me take photos of food we didn't serve, said it was for the brand grid." She meant Haley. I nodded, said nothing, but I remembered. Thursday, I overheard Haley in the alley outside on the phone. "No, she's still here." "Yeah, scrubbing like a champ. It's actually hilarious. She doesn't even know this is a test." The voice on the other end was muffled, but she replied, "Because if she quits, I get the place outright. Clean break, no family drama." That was the moment I realized she wasn't afraid of losing me. She was counting on it. That night, I walked into Miguel's prep station. He didn't. "Look up. You said you had more," I said quietly. He didn't respond. Just handed me another flash drive from his back pocket. This one had a label. Audio only. I left before she could see me. In my apartment, I played the audio. It was from the week before the announcement. Haley to my mom. "We should switch." To pre-cut frozen. "No one can tell." Mom. "Claire will. Haley. Then we'll just say we're trying to save the environment. Less waste. She won't fight back if it sounds ethical." Mom laughed. "You really are a natural." My hands were steady when I closed the laptop. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just knew what had to be done. They thought I was staying. Because I had no options. They forgot one thing. I knew this place better than they ever would. I didn't need to own Harper and Flame to destroy it. I just had to be patient and invisible, like steam in a sealed kitchen. Quiet, relentless, inevitable. It started with a birthday party. Not mine, of course. A private dinner for a tech investor's wife who liked her Wagyu rare, her wine French, and her compliments constant. Haley planned the entire thing, handwritten menus, custom floral centerpieces, even a live cellist who played Coldplay like it was Chopin. It was supposed to be the moment she proved she was more than a figurehead in heels, that she was the face and brain of the new Harper and Flame. She invited Mom and Dad, sat them at the head table, told them this was the beginning of a rebrand rooted in elegance and social capital. I was assigned to rinse glassware and scrub shrimp tails off ramekins. I accepted the role without a word. By the time the dessert course rolled out, the guests had already complained twice about cold entrees and watered-down cocktails. One asked if the béarnaise sauce had been made with margarine. Haley laughed it off, but I saw her hand shake when she reached for her wine. The soufflés collapsed before they made it to the table. Casey, our pastry chef, had warned Haley that the ovens weren't calibrated, but Haley insisted the kitchen just adapt. When the soufflés fell, so did the illusion. The next day, Casey was let go. Haley said it was a creative misalignment. I found Casey outside the back door. Her knife roll clutched like a lifeline. She didn't cry. She looked at me and said, "She's burning it all down and blaming the ashes on us." Then she walked away. That night, I rewrote a menu. Not Harper and Flame's, my own. I pulled out the Ember concept I'd shelved for over a year and reworked it with Casey's desserts as the closer. I emailed her the draft. 30 minutes later, she replied, "I'm in." Miguel noticed the shift before anyone else. The way I started taking notes again, the way I lingered by the supplier invoices, the way I watched Haley, not with rage, but with quiet calculation. He approached me during cleanup, his voice low. "What are you building?" "Something she'll never be able to fake." "She's scared of you," he said. "No," I replied. "She's scared of what I remember." 2 days later, Haley introduced a new front-of-house policy. No visible tattoos, no colored hair, no piercings beyond 1 per ear. Trina, our most senior server, walked out mid-shift. When Haley asked why, Trina said, "Because you're confusing." Elitism with class. Haley told staff Trina was resistant to professionalism. I reached out to Trina that night, asked if she was ready for a place that respected her. She said she'd already packed her black apron. By the end of the week, Harper and Flame's Yelp page had 5 new 1-star reviews, all pointing out inconsistencies in service and food quality. Haley accused the kitchen of sabotage, threatened to fire Miguel for attitude. I told her I'd take over dish duty solo if she kept him on. She agreed, probably thinking it was another submission. It wasn't. I wanted her to trust me, to think I was still licking my wounds while she bled from paper cuts she couldn't see. Then came the vendor dinner. Haley's big pitch night. She'd invited 6 local suppliers, including one who'd done business with us for 15 years. Her plan: charm them, undercut their margins, replace any that pushed back. What she didn't count on: me. Still invisible, still moving. She asked me to bust the room. I accepted. I moved silently, placing cutlery, pouring wine, clearing plates, listening. Halfway through, she excused herself to powder her nose. The vendors murmured once she left. "She doesn't know cuts," one said. Asked if skirt steak could be dry-aged. "She wants half the price for double the yield." "I miss the older sister," another added. "She knew meat like a butcher." I paused, then poured, silently. The next day, one of the vendors sent an email titled, Reconsidering partnership. I printed it and slipped it into my file. Not to save the business, to document its death. That night, Haley pulled me aside. Her tone was sugary. Her words were poison. "You've really found your rhythm down there," she said, meaning the dish pit. "Honestly, you seem happier without all that pressure," I nodded. "Some things are clearer from the bottom." She smiled. "Exactly. No distractions." I smiled back. "Exactly." Later, Miguel handed me a sticky note. "This fell out of Haley's notebook," he said. "It wasn't hers. It was mine. One of my Ember menu sketches. The one with the signature Ember-charred lamb lollipops. My handwriting. My design. Copied. Slightly tweaked. Stolen. She'd found my old file drawer, the one I thought I'd locked. The menu I never showed her. She planned to present it as her own new concept. To Mom and Dad. Rename the upstairs bar Glow. Launch a fire-forward dining movement. She didn't know I had already registered Ember as an LLC 3 weeks prior. She didn't know I had leased a space 5 miles away. Quietly. In cash. Under a holding name. She didn't know the architect was a former Harper and Flame guest. She didn't know Casey had been baking samples in a test kitchen on the west side. She didn't know anything, but she thought she had everything. That's what made it so perfect. Let her copy. Let her build. Let her take credit. The house she was designing had termites in every beam, and I was holding the match. The first time I saw Marco again, he was walking out of the freezer with a towel wrapped around his bleeding hand. He hadn't seen me at first. I was bent over the sink, stripping burned cheese off a baking tray. He muttered something under his breath, then looked up, and froze. "Claire?" I nodded. "Marco." He smiled, but it was brittle. "Didn't expect to see you down here." "Didn't expect to see you still here." He tossed the towel in, the sink next to mine. It was stained with something too dark to be wine. "They had me train 2 interns last week," he said. "One couldn't tell a shallot from an onion. The other asked if steak rested in water." "What did you tell them?" "I told them to ask Haley." That made me laugh, just once, too low to be heard. Then silence stretched between us. Old, familiar, heavy with years neither of us would say aloud. I'd shadowed Marco since I was 16. He taught me how to build flavor backwards, how to smell when cream was about to turn, how to trust fire more than timing. He used to be the soul of this kitchen. Now he was a prop. "I'm leaving," he said finally. I turned to him. "When?" "Soon. Got an offer from a spot in Seattle. Soup position, smaller place, real food." I hesitated, then stepped closer. "If I asked you to hold off, would you?" His eyes narrowed. "Claire, what are you not saying?" But I didn't answer. Not yet. Not until I knew how far the fire had already spread. The next week confirmed it. Haley replaced our local fish supplier with a distributor out of Nevada. Frozen, vacuum-packed, 3-week shelf life. I overheard her tell the front staff to lean into the sustainable angle. Guests? Love that ocean-to-plate vibe. Then she fired Carla, our prep lead, because her spreadsheet wasn't aesthetic. The girl she hired to replace her showed up late on her first day and asked if risotto was gluten-free. I documented every word. Quietly, consistently. Not for revenge, for insurance. Miguel and I shared fewer words now. We didn't need them. Every night we exchanged glances like chess players. I'd stack plates. He'd slide a napkin with a name. I'd ask nothing. He'd explain nothing. One night, the name was Trina. She left over the tattoo policy, he said. Took her regulars with her. Where is she now? Bartending at a dive. Waiting. I found her on a Tuesday afternoon. She was pouring bourbon for a man who looked like he hadn't blinked in hours. When she saw me, her face didn't change. Thought you forgot how to make eye contact. I remember everything, I said. She slid a glass toward me, empty, a silent invitation. I didn't drink it. I'm building something, I said quietly. I need people who know the difference between discipline and control. Haley doesn't. She never did. Trina nodded. Then I'm in. Later. That week, Marco handed me something unexpected. A folded piece of paper. It was a pay stub, not his. Haley had cut hours for half the kitchen staff and funneled the extra into a consulting fee line item labeled under her own name. Yikiao. Think Dad knows? Marco asked. I think he doesn't care to. Marco looked at me, something calculating behind his exhaustion. Tell me what you're doing. I took a breath. I'm not taking the restaurant back. He frowned. Then what? I'm building the one it should have been. The next day, he came to me before his shift, quiet, direct. I'll stay, but only for you. That night, after closing, I updated the Ember deck with new menu builds, Marco's sauces, Casey's desserts, Trina's table flow. I sent a secure link to all of them. Each one replied within an hour. One word, ready. But Haley wasn't standing still either. I learned this the hard way. A week later, during a delivery, one of the new line cooks pulled me aside. Said she overheard Haley talking about a second concept. A pop-up bistro she was pitching to investors. A menu centered on elemental fire cooking. A name? Ember. I didn't flinch. I just asked, did she say where the concept came from? She said it came to her in a dream. I smiled. Of course she did. What Haley didn't know, what she would never know until it was too late, was that I'd filed the trademark months ago. The name, the logo, the menu categories, the full build-out. And more importantly, I had filed it under the name of a small hospitality LLC that had quietly purchased the lease on a space across town, a space being renovated, soundproofed, rewired. For open flame, she thought she was ahead. She didn't realize she was standing on a borrowed name. I called Trina that night. We need a front-of-house manager. She didn't ask for details. She just said, give me 2 weeks. I'll bring 3 servers with me, ones she never noticed. That was when I realized something that stopped me cold. Haley had never taken the restaurant. She'd only inherited a building. The soul had walked out long ago, and I was the one carrying it. The space was nothing but drywall, dust, and echoes when I first walked through it. It used to be a boutique gym, glass-walled, forgotten, abandoned after a fire code violation. The back wall still smelled faintly of sweat and bleach, but I didn't see ruins. I saw staging. I saw control. I stood in the center of the concrete floor and pictured it fully formed. Open kitchen, blackened steel framing the pass, flickering amber light bouncing off raw oak tables. A restaurant designed not to impress, but to dare. Ember wasn't about aesthetic. It was about memory, about heat, about earning your place at the table. Casey met me there with a clipboard and a black coffee, no sugar. Her hair was pulled back, in that same perfect knot she'd worn through every crisis at Harper and Flame. You think we can pull this off in 2 months? She asked. I know we can. She raised an eyebrow. That's new. What is? You used to say, I hope. We can. I looked around at the empty room. I'm done hoping. We worked in silence, mapping layout, equipment, storage flow. Every square foot a reaction to what Haley had turned Harper and Flame into, sterile, performative, hollow. I wasn't building a brand. I was building a rebuttal. We signed the lease under the name Ember Hospitality Group, the LLC I registered 4 months earlier, using an address 1 digit off from the Harper residence. I didn't need my parents seeing the paperwork, yet. The first to join officially was Trina. She brought 2 servers with her, both former Harper and Flame staffers Haley had replaced with ambiance consultants. They didn't even ask about salary. They just asked when to start. I spent nights at the dish pit and mornings in construction. 2 hours of sleep on most days. I was tired, but I wasn't drained. Exhaustion is when you're carrying something you hate. I was carrying fire. What I didn't expect was Oliver. He showed up at Harper and Flame on a Friday. I was stacking wine glasses behind the curtain while Haley gave a tour to a group of local influencers. He wasn't part of her group. He sat alone at the bar, ordered nothing but water, and watched. I recognized him from the Jameson event 2 years ago. He'd praised our duck l'orange so fiercely we got a 15% reservation spike the following week. After they left, I approached him. "Thought you gave up on us," I said casually. He turned. To me, narrowed his eyes. "Didn't recognize the place." "You were never going to." He studied me. "You're still here. For now." He leaned closer. "You have something cooking. I can smell it on you." I said nothing, then he smiled. "When it's ready, call me. But only if you want it to matter." That night, I printed Ember's final concept sheet and slid it into a sealed envelope. I wrote "ready" on the front and stored it in a freezer at the construction site. Not for Oliver, for me. The tension inside Harper and Flame tightened like a belt around the throat. Haley announced a menu refresh featuring wood-fired mains and small plate desserts. "Sound familiar?" she called. "It glow nights." Miguel slipped me a flyer. She'd even copied the ember symbol I'd sketched 3 years ago in a notebook she once borrowed and never returned. I didn't say a word. Instead, I sent an email. 1 sentence. "Table for one?" Attached was Ember's pre-opening invitation. Recipient, Oliver. He responded 2 hours later with 2 words. "Tell me when." I didn't tell Haley about the soft open. I didn't tell Mom. I didn't even tell Marco. The night Ember opened was a Tuesday. Rain was coming down hard, which was perfect. No walk-ins, just intention. The kitchen wasn't finished yet, but the front was polished, candles lit, music low. Ember was designed to be discovered, not announced. Oliver arrived early, wearing a charcoal coat and the expression of a man who already knew the secret. Trina greeted him with the same warmth she used to fake at Harper and Flame. This time, it was real. She seated him at the chef's counter. Marco emerged from the back and paused when he saw the guest. "You didn't tell me," he said. "No," I said. "You'd have overthought it." He laughed once. "You're right. I cooked the first course myself. Smoked quail over parsnip puree, charred lemon glaze, then duck confit, then short rib, aged 28 days. Each plate was met with silence from Oliver, followed by scribbles in a small leather notebook. When dessert came, Casey's cardamom creme brulee with burnt honey, I stepped out of the kitchen and watched. He finished the last spoonful, closed his notebook, and stood up. No applause, just a nod. Then he turned to me. "This," he said, "will make them forget Harper and Flame ever existed." He left without another word. 3 hours later, his blog updated. Headline, "The Best Fire." "I've tasted in a decade burns at Ember." The post went viral overnight. Within 24 hours, Ember's email list doubled. Within 48, food critics started calling. Within 72, Harper and Flame had 5 canceled reservations, one of them from a regular who had dined there every Friday for 6 years. Haley stormed into the dish room Saturday night holding a printed copy of the review. "Is this you?" I dried my hands slowly. "Depends what you mean." "You stole my idea. I filed for the name 6 months ago." Her face went pale. "You planned this." I met her eyes. "You made me." She dropped the paper into the sink and left. I didn't watch her go. I had service to finish. And a new kitchen to build. The night of my father's 60th birthday was supposed to be quiet. Just family, a few staff members, a corner table at Harper and Flame reserved under a name we'd used since before the restaurant had a phone line. I arrived last. No one greeted me at the door. The dining room was dimly lit, candles flickering under the weight of forced celebration. Haley stood at the head of the table, dressed like a corporate sponsor at a gala, all silk and smiles. Dad was seated next to her, uncomfortable in a blazer he hadn't worn since my high school graduation. Mom, beside him, looked as if she'd aged a decade in a week. I took the only empty seat left, far end, near the server station. No one said a word about it. The wine was room temperature. The steak arrived gray, not charred. Dad cut into his ribeye, paused, and took a second look like it might apologize. It didn't. He chewed anyway, slowly, then nodded out of habit rather than conviction. Haley beamed as if she'd personally grilled it. Everything is sourced. Locally now, she said. We've streamlined the vendors. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I knew the new vendor was a distributor in the Midwest. Cheaper, bulk frozen, and absolutely not local. I also knew she'd instructed the kitchen staff to repackage it as sustainable beef. The lie was in the steak, and Dad was swallowing it, because there was nothing else to do. Haley launched into a speech after the entree, talking about her vision, how Harper and Flame had entered a new chapter, and how proud she was to carry the family name forward. The irony landed with the same weight as the undercooked potatoes on my plate. After dinner, I stepped outside. The air was cold. The kind that hits harder when you've been holding your breath for 2 hours. I heard footsteps behind me. Dad. He lit a cigarette. I didn't know he'd started again. I thought you quit, I said. He exhaled. I thought a lot of things. He stood beside me in silence. Then, you still remember how to light the grill without a match? I turned to him. You mean by instinct? He nodded once. Yeah, I said. I remember everything. He looked at me then fully. Not as a daughter or a dishwasher or an employee. Just as someone who hadn't flinched. He didn't say anything else. But 2 days later, he walked into Ember. He didn't announce himself. Just sat at the far end of the chef's counter during our first full-capacity test night. Marco noticed first. Then Trina. No one said a word. We just worked. He ordered 3 courses, ate every bite, watched every move. When the bill came, he left cash, and a note on the napkin. She's losing it. You're not. That was all. I didn't tell Haley. He'd come, but I knew she'd feel it. The space between her and Dad was already splintering, and she didn't know how to stop it. The next week, Harper and Flame failed its first health inspection in over a decade. Rodent droppings, improper food storage, incomplete training logs. The report went public. Haley told Mom she was sabotaged. Mom believed her. I got a text that night. Can we talk? It was from Mom. She met me at a coffee shop the next morning. The same one I used to visit after double shifts at Harper and Flame, back when I still thought I'd inherit the place. She arrived late, as usual. I'm worried about your sister, she began. Interesting, I said. I used to think you worried about me, she flinched. Claire, you've always been the strong one. You don't need hand-holding. No, I said. Apparently I just need gloves and a drain bucket. She sighed, folding her hands. Haley's overwhelmed. Your father's disappointed. This isn't what we imagined, but it's not too late. For what? To come back. To help. There. It was, the offer dressed in concern, the plea wrapped in manipulation. I waited. You're the only one who knows the restaurant inside out, she added. Haley's trying her best, but it's not enough. She looked away. She's your sister. I took a breath. So was I. She went silent. Do you remember the night you told me washing dishes would build character? I asked. That wasn't my call. But you said it. She didn't answer. I stood up. You gave her the keys to the kingdom and handed me a mop. Don't act surprised when I built my own. She reached for my hand. I didn't offer it. As I turned to leave, she said one last thing. Your father wants to meet. Alone. I paused. Where? Harper and Flame, tomorrow, before opening. I agreed. Not for him, for the closure he didn't realize I already had. The next day, I arrived 10 minutes early. The dining room was dark, except for the weak glow of emergency lights. Dad sat in the same chair he had on his birthday. Same blazer. Different posture. You were right, he said. That was new. She's in over her head. I waited. We thought giving her the reins would push her to grow. She didn't. He looked at me then. The same way he did the night he taught me to trim fat with one motion. We should have chosen you. The air was still. I don't need you to say it, I replied. I needed you to believe it. Years ago. What do you want, Claire? I didn't answer. Not yet. Because what I wanted wasn't his to give anymore. I wanted them to watch what I built from the ruins of their silence. And I wanted them to know they'd never be invited in. 3 days. After my father asked what I wanted, Harper and Flame closed its doors without warning. A sign taped to the glass read, "Closed for renovation." The font was too bold. The tape was crooked. It looked temporary because it was, though not in the way Haley had hoped. Inside, the staff had already scattered. Some walked. Others were pushed. The remaining few were clinging to ours like driftwood, unsure which way the tide was turning. Miguel stopped showing up altogether. Marco returned once to pick up knives he'd left in a locked drawer, then left without saying goodbye. Haley, in a final attempt at salvaging her image, posted a filtered video to her social media account explaining that Harper and Flame was reimagining its core values and would return stronger, with a fresh energy. Comments were turned off, but someone took a screenshot and sent it to me. Her face was tight, her words hollow, her clothes more expensive than her instincts. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. We need to talk. I said nothing. Your father and we think we made a mistake. I let the silence stretch long enough for her to feel it. Come, to the house, she added. Please. I arrived 2 hours later. Not because I owed them anything, but because I wanted to see how regret sat on their faces. They were waiting in the living room. Dad looked smaller than I remembered. His hands shook slightly when he handed me the financials. Profit loss statements, vendor debts, Yelp reviews printed in red pen. We want you to come back, he said. To what? To fix it? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. You mean the place I wasn't good enough to run? Claire, Mom interjected, this isn't about the past. Of course it is. You built it. She wrecked it. Now you're here, asking me to save it. That's not the present. That's the invoice. Neither of them spoke. I leaned back in the chair I used to sit in when I was 12, listening to them talk business like it was grown-up language I wasn't allowed to speak. What happened to Haley? I asked. She left for Chicago, Mom said softly. Said she needed space. To do what? She's consulting for a marketing firm. Hospitality branding. I almost laughed. Let me guess, I said. She's selling stories she never lived. Dad cleared his throat. Claire, we need you. The Harper name needs you. I looked down at the financials. Debt, decline, desperation. This isn't about the Harper name, I said. It's about your fear of what happens when that name no longer means anything. We'll give you control, Mom added quickly. Full creative direction. Ownership? Silence. Dad's jaw tightened. That's more complicated. No, I said, standing up. It's very simple. You want me to carry the weight of the fallout, but not the power to erase the history that caused it. He opened his mouth to object, but I cut him off. You gave her the restaurant to prove she was capable. She wasn't. Now you want to give it to me to prove I'm loyal. I'm not. I left them in that room, surrounded by their fading portraits and dusty trophies. Let them sit with the consequences they'd sewn into the carpet. That afternoon, a lawyer from my firm sent them a purchase offer. Not a partnership, not a rescue, a buyout. Cash. Final. No name attached. No legacy preserved. A week passed. Then another, on. The 9th day, I got a single-line email from my father. It's yours. No attachments, no pleasantries. Just surrender. I signed the paperwork in silence. Then I tore the Harper and Flame sign from the front with my own hands. In its place, AEDE. Banner went up, coming soon. Ember House below that in smaller letters, fire done right. Marco was the first to see it. He stopped his car, stepped out, and stared at the lettering for a full 30 seconds. Then he turned to me, standing in the doorway. Why not just burn it down? He asked. I smiled. I did. Quietly. 6 months after the ink dried on the sale, the doors to Harper and Flame reopened, but not under that name. Not under anyone's name, but mine. The building had been gutted. I had ordered the team to strip it down to the bones, literally. Every plaque, every embroidered H&F napkin, every branded wine glass was taken out back and thrown into a dumpster. I watched fill in silence. I wanted to be the last Harper who ever stepped inside with the illusion that legacy equaled merit. On C. The night of the reopening, the new sign was unveiled. Ember House. Black steel lettering. Sharp edges. Clean font. No serif, no sentiment. The interior had been transformed. The dark wood paneling replaced with stone and fire-glazed tile. The open kitchen was framed like a stage. Light poured over the counter like sunlight over ash. No framed photos, no family names. Only food, heat, and precision. Casey stood at the dessert station, her tools arranged like surgical instruments. Marco was running Expo. Trina floated through the dining room with a presence that didn't demand attention, but commanded it anyway. Miguel was behind the scenes now, managing back-of-house systems with a fluency no consultant could fake. The reservations had been filled for weeks before we even announced the date. Oliver's article had been shared by 3 national food publications. Influencers were already trying to film walkthroughs, but I banned phones in the dining area. No distractions, no vanity, just the fire. We opened the doors at 6 p.m. on Satra, the dot. By 6:04, the kitchen was in motion, sharp, clean, lethal. Each plate left the pass with the weight of intent behind it. No decoration for decoration's sake. No edible flowers unless they earned the space. At 7:12, I stepped out from the kitchen just for a moment to breathe. That's when I saw her. Haley. She was standing across the street, just beyond the awning of a closed juice bar, her arms crossed, face blank. She wasn't dressed like a boss anymore. No heels, no silk, just a hoodie and jeans that looked borrowed. But it wasn't the clothes that caught my attention. It was the stillness. She didn't try to come in. She didn't wave. She just stared. I almost turned away. But something in me stayed put. Then, she crossed the street. The hostess looked to me for a cue. I nodded once. Name? The hostess asked. Haley's voice was steady. Harper. The irony settled in the room like cold smoke. Table for one? No, she said. Just looking. Her eyes swept the room, not with jealousy, but confusion. She didn't understand how the same walls had come to feel so foreign. The same space had been redefined without needing her permission. You changed everything, she said, almost to herself. I stepped forward. I had to. She looked around again. They're all here. They chose to be. She met my eyes. You could have just let it die. I did, I said. Then I buried it. She was quiet for a long beat. It's good, she admitted. Better than it ever was. That's not the compliment you think it is. No, she said, but it's the truth. Then came the question I knew would follow. Why not just keep Ember? Why take this too? I didn't smile. I didn't soften because I needed to prove something. To me? To myself. She nodded. Then you've done it. She started to turn away, then stopped. Mom and Dad are in Florida now, sold the house, said they needed distance. They already had it, I said. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No apology, no excuse, only this. If I'd known, you did. She nodded once, as if conceding not defeat, but ownership. She walked away without another word. Inside, the kitchen hummed. The fire never stopped. Later that night, as we closed, Marco approached me. He slid a folded napkin into my hand. On. It, in handwriting I didn't recognize at first. You always lit it faster than I could. Dad Miguel found it in the old dry storage before demolition. I hadn't asked him to keep anything. But he had. I tucked it into my apron. Not because it changed anything, but because it reminded me who I used to be and who I never had to be again. 1 year later, Ember House is fully booked 3 months in advance. The reservation system crashes twice a week. Food critics call it an institution in the making. Influencers film the ceiling because phones still aren't allowed at the table. We've received 3 unsolicited buyout offers from major hospitality groups. I ignored all of them. I sit in my office most mornings now, overlooking the kitchen through a one-way glass pane. It's not about watching them, Marco, Casey, Trina, Miguel. It's about remembering. Each of them walked through fire for me, long before Ember had walls. What we built wasn't just a restaurant. It was a reckoning. The proof that legacy doesn't mean inheritance, it means earned respect. Haley hasn't been back. The last I heard, she'd pitched a boutique branding startup to a venture firm in Austin. Her idea, a consulting agency for female-led legacy businesses in transition. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. My parents send a Christmas card now, generic, glossy. Wishing you peace and success in all you do. No return. Address. I don't reply. Not because I'm bitter, because they already got their answer. The people who once told me to start as the dishwasher now name-drop me in public when it benefits them. I've heard from 3 old classmates who suddenly always knew you'd do something amazing. I've learned to nod and say thank you. Let them believe what they want. I still remember what it felt like. My fingers cracked from dishwater. My back sore from bending over sinks that swallowed hours of my life. I remember standing in silence while my sister laughed, while my mother dismissed, while my father nodded and looked away. I remember thinking, if this is the floor, then I will build from it. And I did. I built with silence, with receipts, with loyalty that couldn't be bought and talent they never thought to measure. But here's the part no one likes to hear. I didn't win because I was better. I won because I stayed quiet long enough for them to bury themselves. What people call revenge, I call balance. I didn't scream. I didn't post. I didn't burn bridges. I built a world where theirs no longer mattered. If you're still listening, here's what I want you to take from this story. Power doesn't always look like rage. Sometimes it looks like restraint, like focus, like letting the people who underestimate you hand you every tool you need to dismantle them. Sometimes the best way to fight back is to outlive. So, to anyone who's been told to stay small, to wait their turn, to work their way up, while others are handed shortcuts, let them laugh. Let them sleep on you, but don't forget. Don't forgive too quickly, and never, ever stop building. In the dark. Because one day, You will walk into the room they swore you'd never belong in, and you'll own the damn thing. If this story hit something in you, if you felt even 1 second of it in your bones, subscribe to the channel. This is only one flame. There are many more stories worth lighting.